what's up? It's VJ, the brother from the ancient mother. You are watching another installment of the Headspace, Africa's most poignant hip-hop podcast, where we focus on, divulge, dig deep, and explore what it means to love, to do, to be hip-hop in the continent of Africa. Now, a hot topic that I would be remiss not to talk about, because, you know, the tides of trend and obviously the omnipotent force that it has on everybody once it passes through, is of course the Grammys. The Grammy Awards are literally the most prestigious music event of the year, because the history of the Grammy as an organization ties back into the history of music. And without going really further into what that was about, that's a whole other episode in and of itself as to how music evolved from now we know as the digital format to the CD to the cassette, and before then the actual birth of the machine called the gramophone, and how that tied into the way music was consumed, and how, just to kind of explain it simply, picture this. Before mediums of recording, music was something people had to go see in order to experience. And what that meant is that the life of an artist was the life of a globetrotter, and that the cultural influences that come with the art that an artist gives can only be experienced by those who can afford to be there. Where if you look at the era, very few people could really afford to attend a typical musical exhibition. So as a result, the creation of musical recording brought music to everybody's home. It breached a class barrier, and yes, inevitably a race barrier, that allowed for culture to be shared, for ideas to be shared, for things to be shared across the globe. So if somebody listens to Amapiano in Japan, that could literally be the birth of a Japanese Amapiano. This is the birth of what music recording does. It spreads culture in different parts of the world. And the reason the Grammys are such an important piece of a monumental musical event is that they kind of have been the event that epitomizes the world coming together and sharing culture through music. And as a result, we all have been taught to revere the Grammys, because we all mirror, to a certain extent, our lives through a lot of these artists. So, in a nutshell, I want to talk about how we mirror our lives through the hip-hop acts. And simply because this year is the year that hip-hop celebrates its 50th year as an existing living organism, you know that the Grammys had to honor that moment, and they had none other than the beautiful and brilliant instrumentalist, drummer of the roots, producer, executive producer in his own rights of many artists, founder of the Soulquarian movement, which gave us or popularized artists like Erykah Badu, Jay Dilla, and made us experience different sides of people like Q-Tip. Talking, of course, of Questlove. I'm a big fan of Questlove. So when I heard that he was curating the 50th year hip-hop anniversary performance, you bet I was super excited, because Questlove is somebody who's, like I said, musically cultured. He understands how music is a sharing of culture. Music is a sharing of ideas. Music is a sharing of time, space, and experience. And as a result, I really relied on Questlove to give us the closest thing to a holistic overview of how hip-hop has grown, where it started, and eventually where it is today. And I'm unfortunately displeased to say that I feel like there were moments that ultimately didn't do that for me. I want to fundamentally talk about that first, because he brought out the typical stalwarts and pioneers. Obviously, you have to start with the foundation of the DJ, and of course having Grandmaster Flash and Jazzy Jeff there was such a beautiful aspect, because Grandmaster Flash coming from this primordial beginning place, and Jazzy Jeff coming from this place where hip-hop was beginning to gain industry recognition through rap music. Bear in mind, Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince were the first winners of the Grammy of Best Hip-Hop, and they fought alongside other rappers who were nominated in the category to have the category aired live on television, because it wasn't. So this was a huge moment for hip-hop at that time. So having Jazzy Jeff there for me was this little bit of a special extra essence. And of course, you had your typical but significant figures. You had Run DMC, you had Queen Latifah and De La Soul, who represent this shift from the breakbeats into a more jazzy, sample-based era, where the sampling wasn't just exclusively based on the funk, and it was something that was developing a whole lot of musicality. And then from there, we have the era of the grimy rap that speaks to the street narrative. So obviously, you had to have artists like LL Cool J, who defined the moment where rap was becoming something of a superstar status art form, but at the very same time, it still had roots in the struggle. It still spoke for the people. So this was a very fat and I think very, very apt lineup up until we get to the West Coast. One of my first criticisms with the curation, because I've sussed and tried to do research everywhere, and unless somebody can correct me in the comment section, there was no attempt to reach out or to try and filter in Snoop Dogg. Now for me, I feel like that's close to blasphemy, because if we're talking the monumental steps in hip-hop's history and you don't have Snoop Dogg, it's a complete and utter jarring gap in the history. There was a point in hip-hop from the shift that was NWA into the boom bap era where Snoop Dogg was the successor of what NWA had built, and he bridged hip-hop to other parts of the United States of America in a more global and commercial sense. Doggy Style, and even prior to Doggy Style, Dre's first Chronic with songs like Nothing But a G Thing. I felt Nothing But a G Thing could have been the song. Snoop could have done a little bit of his rendition there. He could have done something from Doggy Style. My point is, if you're going to have Too Short instead of Snoop represent the West Coast, my thing is the cultural milestones that hip-hop has experienced are expressed through certain figures. And I think by far, any scholastic, any sincere hip-hop head, when given the choice between a Snoop Dogg or a Too Short to show the transition of how hip-hop moves from this specific art form of expression in New York to something a little bit beyond that, would choose Snoop. So that was my first criticism. Why Too Short instead of Snoop? I'd substitute Too Short for Snoop. Another substitution I would make is the choice of the Locks. I mean, come on. I, like any other hip-hop head in the 90s, am a big fan of that New York grimy boom bap, and hearing an Alchemist beat blare into the stage of the Grammys was a really sentimental moment. But if I'm being honest with myself, We Go Make It as a song and the Locks as a group is not indicative of the period in and of itself. There were bigger groups. There were bigger acts. I mean, Primo and all of the other acts that he produced for at that time had more of an influence than, say, the Locks. I don't understand how somebody either from, digging in the crates, maybe the OC, Lord Finesse,
Pharaoh
Monch, Pete Rock and CL Smooth. How can you have a New York act group and not have Pete Rock and CL Smooth, who are both still alive, who are both monumental in the development and the growth of hip-hop in New York as it responded to how it was growing in every other aspect in America? So if you ask me, I would replace the Locks with either Pharaoh Monch or Pete Rock and CL Smooth, because then you have a balance again that speaks for the milestone. What are we trying to do here?
Imagine kungena clan.
Come on, Simon Says, you know, or imagine the other way around. Kungena Pete Rock, Payana scratching, because he's a DJ too. CL Smooth, one of the smoothest MCs who's influenced a lot of rappers after him. So my whole thing was, I felt like there were certain acts who, because this felt like a curation of milestone artists. There were acts who didn't feel like milestone artists to me. Too Short and the Lox are monumental, but they're not major milestones in the growth and evolution of hip-hop. I think they were symptoms and expressions of that wave, if I'm defining it correctly. But either way, if you think differently, holler at me in the comment section. It really bugged me, primarily the fact that there was no Snoop on that motherfucker. Last but not least, an aspect of that curation that really got to my nerves is something that I famously declared as a hip-hop journalist, as a student of the culture, as somebody who stands as an activist for the culture. I feel the moment hip-hop as a culture, with all of its elements, grew and evolved, white monopoly capital took advantage of the one thing that could really gross the most profit for it: rap. And instead of defining it as what it was, rap music, because it was taking the aspect of hip-hop called rapping and using it as a technique to create popular songs, they used the term hip-hop as a kind of music. I think this is a total misnomer. I think to use the term hip-hop music is to not understand that hip-hop is a culture. That hip-hop is graph writing. Hip-hop is breakdancing. Hip-hop is DJ at the center of it all, with the rapper as a spokesperson, the MC, to be more specific.
So you feel like people should have been also part of that?
Part of that.
And graph artists.
And graph artists. Why in the 50th year of hip-hop do we still have this egregious act of acting like rap means hip-hop? And it feels like a lot of the pioneers are even falling for this trick. They're falling for this idea that now the overwhelmingly all-encompassing definition of what hip-hop is today is the milestones that rap music made. When rap music, yes, expanded the global appeal and growth of hip-hop as a culture, but come on, it's just rap. And I think the pioneers, again, are kind of falling under this industry capitalist definition of what hip-hop is, which was created to coerce the whole genre and funnel it into this one musical art form that they were cashing in on. So, for the record, I'm saying it out loud. Rap is an aspect of hip-hop, but rap in and of itself isn't hip-hop. Rap alone could never be hip-hop. Rap is a dynamic that makes up this organism that is hip-hop, just like your body is made up of different things that make you move and breathe and live. And without one organ, you'd ail so much that you'd probably die, and that there's certain organs that are so crucial to your body that they make up the aspect of your life, that for me to look at you and speak directly to you on this podcast, it implies that I have working lungs and a beating heart, and that if somebody was to take out my heart or my lungs, that's the end of me. So does that mean that a heart alone is a person? No, but it definitely means that a person without a literal heart isn't a person at all. Because these things make us up in relationship. So as a result, how can rap alone, as a standalone art form that has grown to become its own unique niche that blends into other sonic structures? The beautiful thing about the art form of rapping is that it also predates hip-hop. The art form of metric chanting and using poetic signatures to speak out loud to an audience is something that was done whether through the ritual of Imbongi here in South Africa, where those who speak for the kings and who speak on behalf of the community and who preserve the stories of the community, something akin to the griot, something akin to this figure that is there in a lot of indigenous cultures that preserves the stories and relays the traditions to everybody in order to preserve the mythology of the community, especially to the children. So as a result, what we now call rapping is the very same art form that our ancestors practiced. So if we don't realize that all of these aspects that make up hip-hop have histories, if you look at the history of what became breaking, you'll see that there was Latin influences which played into the movement of the swaying of the hips, that there were Jamaican influences which played into the DNA of how the breakdancers moved and swiveled and shuffled across the mat. If you look at the art form that became graffiti, you'll understand the artistic movements and the expression that played part in the aesthetic, in the color, in the fonts that tagging emerged to have. That graffiti as a whole can be separatized, made separate, to be looked at as a part of art history, just outside of the scope of hip-hop, in understanding industrial art, in understanding urban art, in understanding art nouveau, in understanding abstract art. So my point, going back to the Grammys, is having a quote-unquote 50th anniversary for hip-hop without all the other elements is just having a rap anniversary. So above and beyond not having a really cohesive curation of artists, I have an issue with the idea of hip-hop as rap alone with some DJing on the side. But also, I have an issue with the fact that it closed off with Lil Uzi Vert, Glorilla, and Lil Baby, who in my opinion all gave, well, with the exception of Glorilla, she's just got an energy about her that's infectious. But I felt like Lil Baby and what's his name? Lil Uzi kind of gave performances which showed that they were out of place. Coming to another one of my famous statements, the fact that trap music is not hip-hop. Going back, tying back into this idea of rap being separate, rap music evolved to have forms and techniques which spread beyond its affinity to hip-hop. And these techniques started to bridge the gap between other musical art forms, borrowing from trance, borrowing from industrial house, borrowing from all of these art forms, which by the way are also rooted in black experience, but nonetheless are their own unique phenomenon. And here's my question to you. When you listen to Future and you listen to LL Cool J, are they doing the same thing? Now I know you're going to say to me, VJ, is LL Cool J doing the same thing as Ja Rule? Is LL Cool J doing the same thing as Pharoah Monch? But that argument doesn't work because they're still primarily using their voice as it is organically. And they might sing on occasion, specifically Ja Rule and Pharoah. But they stick to the concept of metric verse vocally projected in a way that registers in their organic range. Now trap is different in the sense that, to me, and if you don't agree with me, holler at me on the comment section, because this is what it's for. This is what these conversations are for. Trap is more akin to singing than it is to rapping. The only carry-on that is rap inspired in the DNA of trap is the cadences. Trappers sing in a way that's rhythmically projected. So it is about cadence. Whereas a classical vocalist like an Adele or a Beyonce sings in ways that are more direct and communicative. And as much as they might have the rhyme here and there in order to kind of fit into the song structure, their singing is not about rhyming. And their singing isn't so much about the timing of their sentences and the timing of when you say certain words and how. It doesn't conform itself to a kind of poetic device. It's more about how the singer connects vocally to the words and to the arrangement. But with trap music, there is a emphasis in how there is a direct poeticism that's borrowed from the tradition of rap. But because Lil Baby tweaks his voice in a way that is, now hear this, melodic, it becomes a melodic rap. It becomes a melodic form of rap. It becomes trap. So with that being said, I want you, as the viewer, to tell me what piece of this puzzle am I getting wrong? Because to my understanding, we are in a place where we're doing two egregious things. We're following a definition of hip-hop where it's made synonymous with rap music, and as a result, we're forgetting that it is a whole culture and that what has been made popular is rap. And number two, because of rap's popularity and how it's grown musically, it's grown into something that incorporates singing. And we now have a style of rapping which is sung to sonic textures that prioritize the ecstasy of the beat rather than being listened to. See, that's the other difference. Rappers rap on top of instrumentals, but they focus on being listened to. So their symbiotic relationship with the instrumental is very important. Whereas a trap artist is there to blend into the instrumental, sometimes drown in the instrumental, to the point where you can't even hear what they say. Famously, leading up to derisive terms like mumble rap. It's called mumble rap because half of the time, these motherfuckers speak openly in their accent and don't really care about being listened to. Because they're melodically tapping into their emotions. And if you've been at a typical hip-hop show, it is important for a rapper to project and be heard, but it is important for a trap artist to engage with the audience and create almost a rock-like experience of building ecstasy, of creating a bubbling, a climactic experience that leads to a threshold. And hip-hop, with its rap outlet, isn't about that. It isn't about reaching a threshold. It's about engaging in a beautiful play of the body and mind. Trap music is more akin in its spiritual motivation to genres like trance and house and even rock music, because it attempts at an emotional build-up of the soul. It goes da 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 bow. So if you've been in a performance of a trap artist and a rap artist, the rap artist is trying to harness the crowd, the trap artist is trying to disembody the crowd. These are two totally different things. So again, to get back to my point about the two egregious acts that we're doing, we're using hip-hop as a term to mean rap music, forgetting all the other elements of hip-hop. And secondly, because we've forgotten the elements of hip-hop, we're synonymizing trap, which is something totally different, to rap. Because we're in an era where if we're not honest and true to the style and the culture that birthed these two elements, we're always going to find ourselves in these debates that don't make sense. So I, for one, feel like a huge part of how these debates will work and we'll be able to create a cohesive relationship where we all understand where we come from is in fundamentally admitting that we are now doing two totally different things. Trap is the child that has come from rap but has become its own unique cultural and musical phenomenon. And as a result, just because trap artists primarily grew up listening to early hip-hop and this is where they get a lot of their flows, it doesn't mean that what they're doing today is still hip-hop. Because you will never find, in the dimension of how trap is performed, you will never find a breakdancer, you will never find a DJ, and you will never find the aesthetic of graffiti. Trap has its own hyper-commercial capitalist aesthetics that fit more into the category of what rap music became as it was taken over by the industry. Bling bling and the aspiration for wealth and power. So without going into that too deep, that's my first dissatisfaction with the Grammys. So I feel Questlove as a hip-hop practitioner, is also gullible to the industry definition that has synonymized hip-hop as rap music, and as a result he's also fallen victim to this idea that because hip-hop is rap music, the modern form of rap, which trap is also misunderstood as, fits into the context. But call me a purist in this instance, which I really feel I'm fundamentally not. I feel like I'm being more of a deconstructionist. Because if we're gonna use words, at some point we're gonna have to ask ourselves, if this is something, what determines it not being it? You get what I'm saying? Like, if something is called jazz, what isn't jazz? Yeah? If you can call something maskandi, when is it not maskandi? So, as much as we know how to define things, the implication in our definitions is knowing the edges of where it becomes something else. So we know when we've reached beyond the borders of the definition in and of itself. So since we're so comfortable in calling hip-hop a kind of music, what does that mean about hip-hop as a culture? Because I for one feel like there's a dissonance in saying hip-hop music and saying the hip-hop culture. I think you have hip-hop culture proper, which is made up of the elements: rap, graffiti, breakdancing, DJing, and ultimately knowledge of self. Shout out to the Temple of Hip Hop. And I think that with rap coming into fruition as a commercially viable pop genre of music, rap music is the better term to use, because it encapsulates artists that rap across a wide array of styles. So you can have the choppers, you can have the cats in the South doing crunk, you can have the cats in the Atlanta eventually doing a style of rap that would be akin to what would later inspire trap. You would have in New York doing something that we can call boom bap. These are all styles of rap. They're styles that differ from the musicality point of view, which inspires the rappers to deliver different cadences. So now that we've come into this new generation, which has this art form called trap, I feel like we're at that point where a generation that grew up on soul and funk synthesized elements of that, took from the background club of the disco and what emerged from that, and the great music that was made by the James Browns, and how it had these drum breaks which could be capitalized on to become their own signature musical moments, which were taken in the middle of parties which were called block parties, and how the DJs, who were the descendants of the Jamaican toasters, see the descendancy here? See how one comes from the other but it makes something totally new? So in the same way that we're able to realize that the musical signature of rap comes from different elements, funk, jazz, how are we not able to now differentiate that we are in a new era where trap, with its ambient sounds and its deep 808s that are bathed in this more industrial approach to booming into a slow but eventual buildup of ecstasy, how the vocal hooks with their emphasis on auto-tune, which has its roots in industrial house music, is more akin to electronic dance music than it is to rap music. That it's a synthesis of rap in its commercial form with electronic dance music manifesting drum patterns that can adapt and synergize with what rap has become. And voila, you have trap. Now going into that, early on I said trap is a form of melodic rap. And I find it really interesting that in this year's Best Rap category, you have artists like Future, who many feel have been snubbed because they haven't won a single Best Rap award, and yet are the most popular quote-unquote rappers of our era. And I think that's because Future isn't a rapper, folks. He's a trapper who is being snubbed in rap because he's being put, or forced rather, in the same context as a Kendrick Lamar and a Pusha T. Just listening to the musical styles alone, they're so far apart than any other musical landscape that I feel it's criminal to still be trying to channel them into one context. And I think here's a better fit. In 2017, a category called the Best Rap / Song Performance was made. Why? Because in this history of rap music becoming more popular and thus other genres, other styles of music collaborating with rappers, the Mary J. Bliges of the world having songs with Method Man, the Erykah Badu's having songs with Black Thought. There was a new beautiful synthesis where you could have a vocalist on one hand and a rapper on one, and you could have this beautiful coming together of soul and poetry. And you couldn't still nominate these songs in the same category as you could as Best Rap Performance. Because there was a different point and there was a different direction that was taken. So as a result, the board, in their wisdom and understanding the artistry, took the decision to create a new genre. Rather, a new category. Excuse me. And this category would be won by famous collaborations such as Eminem and Rihanna, such as, I'll go into the history of the winners right now, but I want to go into how this is a very important category. Because I think what this category does is that it creates a place for trap. Because what happened is, after the growth and evolution of this category, in seeing that many rappers were now becoming singers, and that we were ushering into an era where, if you look at what Future is doing, it's very, very hard to separate it from what an artist like Chris Brown is doing. So how does Chris Brown still manage to be Best R&B and Future is on Best Rap? So here's, I think, where the solution lies. If this category, which was later renamed, and check what they renamed it, they decided to name it the Best Melodic Rap. See what we said about trap? And I think the solution is that if we're gonna know how to appreciate the rise of this new phenomenon called trap, we're gonna have to learn to separate it from rap as it's evolving.
Yeah.
These two things blur in many instances because it's music, folks, and that's what happens. Artists collaborate in the same way that it was very difficult for people to say Lil Nas X's rendition of Old Town Road wasn't country because it had country elements, but it was a trap song. See, and I think this is what we need to learn from terms and genres, is that ultimately it's about, one, the musical signature, but two, the vocal style of the artist, which more or less tells us where we can categorize this. But we'll go into the politics of categories later on. And I think if we want to be respectful to each art form, there's a place in which it starts and it ends. There's a place in which painting cannot be defined as sculpting, which cannot be defined as sketching. Even though a fine artist may know how to do all three. So there comes a time where a rapper may know how to sing, a singer may know how to rap, but there's still two different aspects that have worlds within them. So I think the solution for the Grammys and for culture at large is to take the Best Melodic Rap Performance category and turn it into a category that acknowledges the albums that have been performed in styles of rap that are melodic, aka trap.
And you know what's funny?
What's funny, that is?
Future won that category on the Grammys.
Exactly.
Yep. Future won it.
Future won this year. His song with Thames and Drake.
Yep.
Who are all, by the way, in that song singing. But Drake and Future happen to be singing with rap cadences.
Yeah.
Now, I think this is a start. I think you could do that, or just create a best trap category. Because at some point it is what it is, and trying to fit it into the context of what's close doesn't work. But this is a start. I think the purpose of this episode is to kind of start the conversation. Well, a couple of conversations. Number one, when we say hip-hop, we're not talking about music, we're talking about a culture, which includes many things, such as rap. And also when we're talking about trap, we're talking about something that may come from rap, but is now something totally unique. And I think these conversations need to be had, especially in light of music being celebrated. Because if we don't know how to celebrate ourselves, other people will definitely won't know how to celebrate us. And I think the point of the Grammys isn't even to celebrate us, it's to cash in on our culture. But either way, we are the ones that teach them how to draw these lines so that they can just navigate around them and make money out of them. So I do think if we're going to teach the Grammys or any other society or organization how to refer to us, how to treat us, we're going to have to learn how to treat ourselves. And I think as hip-hop heads, we're doing ourselves a disservice in pretending like hip-hop is music instead of understanding that the rap has become a musical art form because we neglect the other aspects. I'm Viwe, the brother from the ancient mother, and I'm not just purely trying to be sensational. I care about the art form, I care about the culture. I love the Grammys as a entertainment piece, and I think looking at them made me realize how those aspects are becoming more glaringly apparent for me, and I don't know about you. Talk to me in the comment section. Please subscribe if you haven't. These episodes are what we do on a daily. We engage with the hard stuff, but we do it in ways that hopefully are easy and accessible enough for you to understand and for you to feel like you can participate. It's all love.